Good afternoon. I declare open this public hearing for the committee's inquiry into the importance of Antarctica to Australia's national interests. The committee is very pleased to be here with you all in Hobart, Australia's Antarctic gateway, and to hear directly from the Antarctic sector. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting here today and extend that respect to any First Nations people in the room or joining us online. In accordance with the committee's resolution of the 8th of August 2022, this hearing will be recorded and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. Those present here today are advised that filming and recording are permitted during the hearing, and I'd like to remind any media who may be present of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the committee. So I'm Alicia Payne. We've got Nola Marino as the Deputy Chair, we've got Luke Gosling from the Northern Territory, Matt O'Sullivan from WA and Andrew McLaughlin from South Australia. So welcome Mr Fader. I now call representatives of the Tasmanian Polar Network to give evidence. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Richard Fader, and Chair of the Tasmanian Polar Network.
Thanks for being here today. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing of proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. And I now invite you to make an opening statement before we proceed to questions.
Well, thanks very much, Ms Payne and committee, and thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. The Tasmanian Polar Network is an industry association that represents the Tasmanian Antarctic sector in particular. We're made up of a membership of 70 members. We've been around for just over 30 years, and our membership comes from the science, education and commercial sectors. And we're here to support those organisations in their endeavours in the Antarctic and the commercial operators in identifying those opportunities for business with Antarctic nations. It's not only the Australian Antarctic program, but it's the other Antarctic programs that use Hobart as their gateway to the Antarctic. And also those organisations that use Hobart as their home, such as CSIRO, IMAS, the University, SUS and many, many others. We provide our membership provides a niche and a wide range of specialised goods to all organisations that are operating in the Southern Ocean and the Antarctic. And as I said, that includes the Australian Antarctic program and a number of other national Antarctic programs. It's the Polar Network's vision for Tasmania to be the world's leading hub of excellence for Antarctic and Southern Ocean sector. And that's across everything, whether it be science, education or supply of commercial equipment. Our mission is to strengthen, promote and grow Tasmania's business, education, training and research expertise in the Antarctic and the Southern Ocean. So that's a brief overview of what the Polar Network's all about.
Excellent, thank you. So how does the TPN contribute to the operation of the Australian Antarctic program?
As I said, we're a membership-based organisation. We have no direct commercial relationship with the AAD or the other national programs. It's our members that have those commercial relationships. So it's the TPN's role to identify gaps in the skill set that Tasmania. We're very parochial, we're very Tasmanian. It's all about the opportunities for Tasmania in the Antarctic sector. So we'll look at things where there's gaps in the capability of Tasmanian business and when there's a requirement for the Australian Antarctic program or other national Antarctic programs, and try and encourage through collaboration of a number of businesses to fulfil that requirement. And that's something that's worked very successfully, where we bring organisations together and then they will bid as a group for the requirements of the AAD or other countries' national programs.
So what led to the establishment of the network, and how do you advocate for your members and the industry?
Well, certainly it was formed, as I said, 30 years ago. It mainly came from the commercial side, where there was a group of businessmen that had businesses that worked in the Antarctic, but they never were seen as a united voice. So they formed the Tasmanian Polar Network, and then it was very quickly joined by the science and education organisations as well as the commercial organisations. So our role is we promote Tasmania as a gateway, we promote Tasmania as the hub of Antarctic excellence, and we look at threats, potential threats to that industry, whether it be through inadequate infrastructure, whether it be through inadequate funding for science, or whether it be through geopolitical concerns. So it's really to advocate with the Commonwealth and our state government to make sure the resources are there to support the work that needs to be done in the Antarctic.
Okay, thank you. So could you comment on how the TPN sees the value of Hobart being the gateway to the Tasmanian economy and more broadly the Australian economy?
Yeah, sure. It's incredibly valuable. Tasmania probably has very few geographical advantages, but our closeness to the Antarctic is one of them, and it's one that we should use and exploit. The Antarctic industry is worth around about $200 million to the economy, and around about $186 million of direct spend in Tasmania. It also supports nearly 950 full-time equivalent roles in the state, and these are roles that are highly paid and higher than the average pay, and that's across science, education, and also commercial suppliers.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fader, for being here. You just touched on a really interesting point around potential threats. Now, with your organisation, what have you identified? You mentioned resourcing threats, geopolitical threats. What do you see as some of the practical threats to the AAD here that you've identified as part of your collective?
Well, practical threats are probably at a high level. It is a reduction of funding and inadequate funding to support the work that they do. And it's certainly not only the Antarctic Division, it's others operating in the Southern Ocean as well, such as CSIRO and the university. So funding is a very important part of it. Adequate infrastructure is another very important part. There's only one way to get goods to the Antarctic, and that's either over the wharf or via the airport. So to have quality infrastructure that supports the current program and potential growth in the Antarctic programs is really important.
Okay, on the growth piece, in relation to the port itself, what do you see as the potential threat in there, or what else needs doing, please?
Well, there's certainly been some media recently about Macquarie Wharf and a permanent home for Nyena and the Australian Antarctic program on the Hobart waterfront. That's something that is a commercial negotiation at this stage between Tasports and the Australian Antarctic program. We believe it's progressing, but it's progressing at a very slow pace, and it has become somewhat political in the last few months. It would be good to see those negotiations concluded and MAC 6 become the new permanent home for Nyena.
And just one final question, Chair, if I could, please. Just on the issue of Nyena is one part of this. Do you see any potential expansion of the needs in the wharf for additional capability for the AAD?
Well, that's a question for the AAD, but from the industry's point of view, we believe there's currently maybe a clash between science and logistics.
Yeah.
And that's through operating a one-boat program. The Australian Antarctic Division hasn't operated, it is in the majority of the years I've been involved, they've operated a two-boat program where logistics and science have been somewhat split. So to get back, I imagine, and the Antarctic Division will probably speak to this, but to get back to an effective science program, that may need a return to a two-boat program, which would then put added pressure on wharf and berthage type facilities.
And the need for greater access.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Fader. Do you have any international members?
No, as I said earlier, the polar network is very parochial. It's very, and in fact, that's whether it's right or wrong. That's one of the conditions of our membership, that they have a connection with Tasmania.
And do you run what's coming up? Is it the Antarctica conference or something?
No, there's the Australian Antarctic Festival, and that's run by the Mawson's Hut Foundation, which is one of our members. And that's really to try and get the public more aware of what's done in the Antarctic, and to hopefully get students engaged in the Antarctic, and hopefully giving them an overview of how they can progress in their career. And Tasmania is quite unusual. It's probably one of the only science places where you can do Antarctic science and stay in your home state. So it's a little bit like Queensland with the Barrier Reef, I suppose. So it's really important to get that awareness in the general public about the importance of the Antarctic and the opportunities that are there.
I mean, aquaculture seems quite large as well. Are they members of yours?
No.
It's separate. The waterways around Tassie and aquaculture.
Are quite separate. Yeah.
You sort of touched on the ports. Just interested in the range of aviation related members that you might have.
We certainly have Sky Traders as one of our members who have the current AAD contract to supply aeronautical services to the AAD. We have Helicopter Resources who supply the helicopters to the AAD. Hobart Airport has been incredibly successful in securing funding for upgrades of their runway, which has meant that the air support to the Antarctic program from the Australian Air Force has increased considerably. 5 or 6 years ago, there was very, very little support from the Air Force, but now there's significant support from the Air Force to support the Australian Antarctic program, and that has come through the investment by Hobart Airport in their runway. That means that fully laden flights can leave Hobart direct to the Antarctic.
Thanks. I've got some other questions, but I'll let other people go, Chair.
Got any?
Yeah, just one. You were talking about the delay in negotiation with the port. Do you have any sense of the impact that that's having on your members? What was the colour of that?
Our members are obviously concerned. They're seriously concerned, because when we would like to see the Australian Antarctic program with a guaranteed future in Hobart for the next 100 years. However, when things go, when there is uncertainty in the market and an uncertainty about the berthing and uncertainty about the commercial agreement between Tasports and the AAD, obviously our membership gets somewhat concerned. And then the media picks up on Western Australia thinking they may like the Australian Antarctic program, and then that's of a real concern, because, as I said before, around $186 million is directly spent in Tasmania on the Antarctic program, and nearly 950 jobs. So if you were talking about a sector leaving an area because of something like that, it's incredibly serious. So we just implore Tasports and the state government to get this agreement in place as quick as they can.
And are you seeing any sort of chilling effect on decisions and investment by any of your members, sort of waiting to see if they've got the certainty? Is that, or is it just sort of elevated sort of anxiety?
Elevated anxiety, for sure.
Materialising through decisions?
Yes, there's no decisions that we have seen by the AAD that have been, or programs that have been stopped because of this indecision on the wharf. We can certainly support NAINA in the current setup of the wharf, but it really isn't ideal for their ongoing operations.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator McCall.
Yes, you mentioned that you are also an advocacy body. Who are you advocating with mostly? The Tasmanian government or?
Well, certainly for funding, it's the federal government. The federal government supplies 99% of the funding to the Australian Antarctic, well, nearly 100% of the funding to the Australian Antarctic program. But we also advocate with the state government to make sure that things that they have a role in, such as their GBEs, such as Tasports, are up to supplying the infrastructure that's required. Also making sure where the state can make doing business easier with the Antarctic, whether that be through quarantine arrangements and things such as that. The state has limited, limited probably say in Antarctic endeavours, given that it's all nearly 100% Commonwealth funded.
So where are you expressing your view? To the Minister's office?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, to the ministers and the Premier.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So you mentioned obviously about the federal government funding. Are there specific areas that you are advocating for increased funding for the program?
It really is. It's the overall science funding for the Australian Antarctic program. The Commonwealth has been exceptionally supportive logistics-wise, and obviously with the supply of Nyena, with the station upgrade program, with Macquarie Island upgrade program, with the traverse capability. So the investment over the last 3 or 4 years and in the coming 4 or 5 years has been unprecedented. There's been significant support for the Antarctic. But some people say, you know, maybe science has suffered somewhat at the expense of logistics. So we would like to see the Commonwealth ensure that the science program is maintained in the Antarctic.
Could you just elaborate on that a bit? That a view that science has suffered at the cost of logistics, or?
I think it's unfortunate. You know, the delivery of, I don't think people quite understand the complexities of delivering a vessel such as Nyena and delivering it during COVID. That was an incredibly challenging time for the AAD. And the science that's done in the Antarctic is all based upon access to the Antarctic. So, so whether it be via ship or by plane or by the actual number of people in the Antarctic. So while Nyena was going through its trials and a few tribulations, that was where science had suffered. And science funding expires for programs, and then it's the same system to try and get that money back to continue the science on.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier around a view that, or certainly some people have a view that they might need to return to 2 ships. Can you elaborate on why people would have that? Is that your view?
It's probably not my real area of expertise. I can only speak of what has happened in previous seasons. At the present time, they're trying to conduct science and deliver logistics to the stations all in one voyage. And that becomes a real challenge when obviously operating in the Antarctic, nothing's ever guaranteed, especially the weather. So there are potentially significant delays in logistics and resupply and taking expeditioners to stations and returning them from stations. And it's usually, unfortunately, that science that suffers in that scenario. Whereas if you're operating a 2-boat program, you would have a dedicated science vessel that wouldn't be constrained by changes to logistics.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Fader, just you touched on the issues around funding. Are you aware of any recent reduction in funding available to AAD and its purposes?
Not directly. I think that would be for our science members to comment, and I think some of them are appearing before you over the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Just in relation to like upcoming projects, like I think it's got a lot better, but one of the things that industry often says about government agencies and projects is that they always want greater visibility of what's in the pipeline in terms of procurement, in terms of services contracts, etc. What's the general view on from the network in relation to the communication or the scheduling around procurement?
Yeah, I think from the industry's point of view, the Australian Antarctic program in particular are exceptionally good of articulating their requirements for the upcoming season, for their upcoming projects. They really operate exceptionally well in that regard, I believe. There's certainly it's never been from our membership a concern that things are held back or things aren't explained properly. Or we have the AAD as one of our members, and they're very forthcoming with information when they come to our meetings about what they're up to, what their projects are, and then where the opportunities are via AusTender and things like that to support their projects. Probably there's been a little bit of frustration, I imagine, or definitely some frustration over the last few years due to the unavailability of NIENA and science programs being delayed.
Right. One of your members flagged with me something I hadn't heard about before, which is a runway program on Mac Island.
I don't think that would be possible.
Actually, Mac Island...
Was it the one at Davis, the Davis runway project that was cancelled?
No, I thought it was Mac Island, but having said that, I've just remembered that Mac Island is outside of our...
That's Tasmanian, yeah. That's a Tasmania, but there's certainly not going to be a runway on Macquarie Island. I don't think there's a very narrow isthmus between the two parts of the island, and it certainly wouldn't support a runway.
Did they mean maybe a helo landing pad?
Maybe, and it may be part of the Macquarie Island upgrade project, and that's something our membership's very excited about supporting.
Oh.
So even though it is it is part of Tasmania, the Antarctic Division support it with their station and things. So.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard of either a helicopter or a runway.
Oh, I don't want to start rumours.
No.
Particularly when it's outside the bounds of the inquiry.
No.
I might just leave it there, Chair.
Thank you. So there's also been discussion around a fuel barge, or how that could be used to address the issue with the NIENA not coming under the bridge. Do you feel that would contribute to the growth of the Antarctic sector in Tasmania, or otherwise?
Well, most definitely. That's something we approached the state government with about 5 years ago, and this was way before NIENA's time, about the suggestion of a fuel barge. It is unusual for resupply, or it's unusual for any ships to actually transit to a dedicated bunker berth to pick up their fuel. Like in most other ports around the world, they would have a bunker barge facility. And that builds great efficiencies in the operations, because they do their landside work at landside without having to stop to refuel. So you bring a bunker barge alongside, and those two things can work concurrently. It would be either bunker barge or pipeline to Macquarie 6 would build some great efficiencies for the Antarctic Division in the operation of their program at the wharf.
Great. And do you have an estimate of the cost of that?
The cost is, in the overall scheme of things, it's negligible. It's
right.
It's $4 or $5 million for a fuel barge. And it's something that we believe the state government needs to look at, and it would not only be for the Antarctic, but it would be for any shipping that comes to Tasmania, whether it be cruise or just general commercial shipping. It would have some. It would take time to build the capability and have clients using it, but it certainly would give some great efficiencies to the AAD or other national Antarctic programs using Hobart.
Okay. If the cost of that's negligible, as you say,
probably shouldn't say negligible.
Well, I know
$5 million's a lot of money, but
but why hasn't it happened then, in your view?
That would probably be a question for the Antarctic Division. However, I think the timing is not quite right. The Antarctic Division has a contract for the supply of their fuel with a vendor at the moment, and that vendor's probably not too fussed about how they deliver that fuel or where they deliver that fuel. But for the good of the sector, a barge or a pipeline to the berth would be exceptionally helpful.
Okay. And interested how your members contribute to manufacturing Antarctic-specific equipment and plant?
Sure. Well, we've got a great manufacturing capability in Tasmania, and that manufacturing capability is built out of the Antarctic manufacturing capability is normally built out of the requirements of the Australian Antarctic Division. We've got some companies such as William Adams, Elphingston Engineering, Taylor Brothers, that they collaborated and delivered the whole traverse capability to the Australian Antarctic Division. And that was from modifying tractors to building sledges to building accommodation modules. that's something that they then have exported to, we talk about export, but we're not really. We're only exporting to the French Antarctic Territory or the Americans or the Italians. So it's not as though they're going to those countries, but it's going to their Antarctic territories. So the capability that in the case of the Traverse capability, that came from originally a requirement from the French. And they sold a number of these tractors and a number of these Traverse caravans to the French Antarctic program. That followed by the Italians, and that was followed by the Chinese, the Americans, and now the Australians. So it really, the capability is built from the requirements of the individual Antarctic programs, but it has a consistency across all Antarctic programs. So once you've got a product that works well for one, it can very easily be, again, sold to the other Antarctic nations. And so that's talking about physical tractors and things, but there's a huge capability in electronics and that type of thing as well to support the Antarctic that comes out of Tasmanian business.
Thanks. Thanks. Thank you. Mr Fader, just you've touched on the local procurement piece, and you've talked about the significant injection of AAD-based funding that goes into the local economy, essentially. All of your members, are they comfortable with is the level of local procurement in and around Hobart from the AAD? You've touched on an approximate $200 million value. Given the importance of the AAD and its not only to the local economy, is the level of local procurement, given the AAD's budget, in the minds of your members, appropriate?
It can always be more, but we certainly believe it's very appropriate. As I said before, the Antarctic Division have they are exceptionally, they don't, well, obviously they cannot favour Tasmanian business, but they favour good capability and good innovation, and that's certainly what we've got here. So there's a number of businesses that have been very, as I said earlier, very, very innovative in the equipment that they make for the AAD that's led to further export opportunities. So I think in general our membership is very happy with the way the AAD procures, but in return, through that procurement by the AAD, our membership's been able to invest in innovation and new ideas and build their overall business in the Antarctic sector, not just with the AAD. So I think there is, in general, a very positive relationship between the Tasmanian Antarctic sector and the Australian Antarctic Division.
And what proportion of new additional businesses, given the changing requirements of AAD, there would be, you would think, additional local businesses that have seen an opportunity out of the AAD?
There certainly is. There's obviously the upcoming station rebuild program is something that would be, in general, far outside the capability of individual Tasmanian businesses. But the AAD, through their procurement process with their prime contractor, has been very careful to make sure that prime contractor engages with Tasmanian business. And we've seen that happen over the last couple of years. We saw it happen with the now cancelled Davis Runway project, where the prime contractor, which wasn't a Tasmanian company and in fact was an international company, had a significant engagement with Tasmanian businesses and our membership. So, and I think that's something where, given the value of these projects, our members would not probably take them on individually, but as part of a consortium led by a larger company, they were certainly pleased to be part of it.
Right, thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Who is the head contractor for the station rebuild?
I'm not 100% sure it's been officially announced yet, so maybe that may be a question for the Antarctic Division, I think. But there were two contractors, and it's our understanding one has been selected. So, but maybe talk with the AAD could tell you that.
Did anyone else have any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fader, for your evidence today. We sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and we'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
very
Thanks for the
much
opportunity.
again. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll just suspend the proceedings while we wait for the next witness. Yep. Okay. So I'm just going to formally. I now welcome the representative of the Southern Ocean Observing System to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Thank you. So my name is Dr. Elise Hancock and I'm the Executive Officer for the Southern Ocean Observing System and here speaking on behalf of the Southern Ocean Observing System.
Thanks again for coming. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing of proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. And I now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we proceed to questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So as I'm sure you're hearing for all the submissions into this inquiry, the Southern Ocean Antarctica is incredibly important. Not only is it a very unique ecosystem, but it's also globally important for our entire global system. So the Southern Ocean itself is one of the largest uptakes of heat and carbon into our global oceans. It drives global ocean circulation, but it also has a large effect on global sea level rise as well. So I guess in many regards what you could say is what happens in the Southern Ocean doesn't stay in the Southern Ocean and it impacts all of us and everybody around the globe. But it's currently undergoing massive changes. We're seeing record low levels of sea ice, record high temperatures and catastrophic breeding failure of some of the emperor penguins. Not only is it a really unique environment, but it's also a really unique situation in the way that a number of nations, programs and international initiatives operate in the region. However, this also makes some difficulties. Nations tend to operate regionally. For example, Australia mostly operates in the East Antarctic. Programs and international initiatives mostly operate in one or a couple of science disciplines. The observations themselves are really hard and expensive to collect, often meaning they're quite sparse. So all this together resulted in an observing system that was disjointed, inefficient and uncoordinated, and an observing system that we really need to be able to understand the role of the Southern Ocean in our global climate system. So this is where SOOS came in. Established in 2011, the Southern Ocean Observing System, or SOOS, was established to be able to to solve some of the inefficiencies that have arisen due to those matters that I mentioned. Our community is quite extensive and international. It has over 800 members from over 50 countries. It includes people from industry, research, other global observing programs, data programs, logistics and operations. And altogether we're working towards the mission to facilitate the sustained collection and delivery of those really important Southern Ocean observations. So I'd like to use the analogy that we're the ones building the bridges between the silos, connecting together those nations and all those different programs. We're pulling them together so we've got aligned priorities for those observations so that we're all working together towards unified objectives, bringing everyone together to enhance collaborations so we can really make the most of the limited resources and the high cost of collecting the observations. We're pulling together teams of international experts to be able to solve challenges that we're facing, whether that's a technological challenge, which is resulting in a gap in the observing system, making sure all the data from the observations is made available to everybody so that we can make the most of it, and all the knowledge we're gaining from those observations is available to all stakeholders and, most importantly, to policy and decision makers. So I've got two examples of how, firstly, we've identified and resolved an inefficiency in the observing system, and then secondly, the valued and independent voice that SOOS has. So firstly, not only are observations sparse, but the data from those can be actually really hard to find. It can be split across data centres around the world, so it can be quite hard for researchers to pull that together to do that really important big picture science. And so SOOS has been working between all these data centres in collaboration with the European Marine Observing Data Network to develop an interactive web portal or a clickable map of the Southern Ocean that provides all these observations in a single place to improve their visibility and accessibility. At the moment, it's got over 50,000 data sets and more coming every day. And it's really just providing that one-stop shop where researchers can go to find that data, to be able to answer those really important questions and to be able to understand the role of the Southern Ocean in the global climate system. Secondly, our valued voice, and this really came to the fore during our inaugural Seuss Symposium held in August here in Hobart last year. At the symposium, the breadth and the calibre of the Seuss community was really on display. We had 300 attendees from 25 countries, and on the final day we released a community statement which was calling for the enhanced collection of observations from the Southern Ocean, particularly in light of the critical changes we're currently seeing. This statement, as well as the media release associated with it, was the focus of over 40 international media products, including the front page of The Guardian, and has since been used for justification for a number of proposals for new Southern Ocean observational programs, as well as in a lot of policy forums, including the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meetings, the Commission for the Convention of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, or CAMLR, and the UN COP Climate Change Conference. But not only is Seuss important internationally, it's very important in Australia. We've had our International Project Office based here in Hobart since our inception in 2011, and through being here, Seuss has really contributed to Australia's standing as a leading nation for Southern Ocean and Antarctic research. We're also contributing to Hobart's status as an Antarctic gateway city, and this has been highlighted through both the University of Tasmania and the Tasmanian State Government submissions as well. We're also providing an economic benefit to Australia. The symposium alone was valued at being worth over $1 million to the Tasmanian economy by Business Events Tasmania. But most importantly, we're allowing Australian researchers to have a finger on the pulse of international research. Through their involvement in Seuss, they're able to see what upcoming international research there is, so they can propose and conduct research which is of international impact. But not only have they got the finger on the pulse of the research that's happening, they're also driving that research. So, for example, Seuss released a very influential paper with the upcoming priorities for Southern Ocean research, and a third of the authorship of that paper was Australian. So the Australians really had a strong role in putting forward what the priorities for observations are moving forward. However, we've had lots of challenges with our sponsorship and hosting in Australia, and that's becoming increasingly difficult. To date, most of the sponsorship for both Seuss's staff and operational costs has come from Australian partners, with some financial contributions from international investors, as well as significant in-kind contributions through the development, hosting and maintenance of our key products. However, over the last 2 years and next year, we've only received a single year's funding bid, which has come through quite last minute and been an emergency pull-together bid for the ongoing hosting and sponsorship of Seuss in Australia. And that both those commitments and the projections of forward commitments mean that the ongoing viability to sustain the Seuss International Project Office in Australia is really under threat. We need a stable and sustainable budget to move forward. We need to be able to get a multi-year funding together. We need about 480,000 Australian dollars to operate. And we currently got significant efforts underway to increase our international investment, including through philanthropic means, and to have these investments over a multi-year time frame, because at the moment our international investments are normally re-agreed annually. So we really need to be able to develop this stable, sustainable model, and we need to develop that by the end of this year. Otherwise, we're going to be in a position we're going to have to release an international call for a new host and sponsor for Seuss, and probably look at relocating the Seuss International Project Office outside of Australia. And all this is at a time where we really need stability. We really need a coordinated, sustained observing system to understand what's going on in the Southern Ocean at the moment, predict what is likely to happen in the future, all of which is important not only for those unique ecosystems and biodiversity in Antarctica, but the role it's playing globally, and therefore the effects we're seeing here in Australia and around the globe, and to be able to inform good policy and regulations to be able to protect the Antarctic and to be able to respond to the changes in the Antarctic and what that's doing here in Australia. Thank you for allowing me the chance for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hancock. That's great to have you here today. I'm just interested first to understand, so was SUS an Australian initiative, like did we begin it or?
No, so it's actually an international initiative. We're governed by two other independent international bodies, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research and the Scientific Committee on Oceanic Research. So in its totality, it's international, just with a project office based here in Australia. However, a number of Australian researchers were integral in the development of SUS, which is why the project office started here in Hobart.
Right. And the members are, the countries aren't members, are they? It's organisations or individuals?
Yes, that's correct.
And
yes.
so how does, do the individual members pay to be part of it or to contribute? What's the...
Yeah, so no, we don't have any financial contributions to be a member. That's for two reasons. The first one is both of our governing bodies, SCAR and SCORE, are a member fee. They're a country member fee to those, and we do receive some sponsorship from both of those organisations. However, their budgets are not such that they could actually fully cover SUS. And they're not in a position they could make their membership fees high enough to be able to fully cover SUS. Right. We don't charge individuals to be a member or institutions to be a member because we're trying to make this all as open and accessible to everybody as possible. So we're trying to make an equal playing field for everybody to be able to come in, to be able to collaborate, to be able to be a part of SUS and really make it at the success that it is. However, that does have the counterside that it is hard then to gain the investments to keep us going.
Right. And I understand that the Australian government invests $300,000 annually, is that?
So historically, between Australian partners, so that is between university, CSIRO, state government and federal government, we've received, depending on the year, between $300,000 to $360,000 Australian dollars. Right. Yes, and that's up to the end of next year.
And is that similar to what other countries invest into?
No. So it's significantly more than what other countries invest. For most international programs like a SUS, there's a couple of different models that they tend to be funded by. The first one is a member fee model that I mentioned that SCAR and SCORE have. Mm-hmm. That normally is something that is quite an old organisation will have those sort of membership fee models, and they're actually finding that increasingly challenging to receive those membership fees, and countries are struggling to be able to pay them sometimes. The second most common model you see is where a single country hosts the project office of that program as part of sponsorship for that project office, and that's normally the most other common model and the model that SUS has had, where we will get small investments from other countries. They're normally related to a product or an activity, but the primarily staff costs would come from the host country, and then in return for that, the host country really gets above and beyond the value of that program compared to other countries, which I believe you will provide a prospectus document along with my submission, and you can see there that Australia really, particularly if you think into the amount of researchers within Australia compared to other countries like the US, which have quite the large population, Australia is really gaining the vast majority of the benefit, particularly per capita.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And your submission mentions that SUS is strengthening Australia's territorial claim. Can you elaborate on why that is and the importance of SUS to that?
Yeah, so I guess it's in a couple of different ways. The first one is supporting Antarctic research in Australia by having SUS here. As I said, the value really Australia gets a lot out of it. We do work quite closely with Australian programs such as the Australian East Antarctic Monitoring Program to be able to support that program through SUS's efforts. That would be done more so for Australia than any other country, just purely from us being here. But secondly, we have an independent voice at the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings and at the Commission for the Convention of Antarctic Marine Living Resources meetings, or CAMLR. And that voice aligns with that of Australia. We're not saying anything different to Australia. And that is with the project office sitting in Australia, that is part of the reason that voice is supporting Australia and supporting Australia's claim to Antarctica in those forums.
And I'm just interested if you'd like to talk about some of the key findings or outcomes from SUS that have been crucial for, global environmental climate science, or particularly those involving Australian researchers.
Yes. So, sorry, just let me think through. I'm just trying to think through some papers in the Australian researchers. So I guess I'll provide one example while I kind of think through. So this is one of our working groups within SUS. It does include Australian researchers within this working group, but I'm sorry, I actually can't remember all the authors on this paper to know if they were included in the paper. But it's working on using satellite imagery to be able to gain population estimates of mammals in Antarctica. So started with seals and they've been moving towards penguins. And some really unique work, including machine learning and AI technologies to help with that. But as part of that work, it meant that they were gaining all these photos of emperor penguin colonies in Antarctica, and that's when they then saw that catastrophic breeding failure at a time we're not normally able to collect observations because it's the time of year it's hard to have boots on the ground. And so through that saw that there was that catastrophic breeding failure, and really has elevated then the status of the emperor penguins as being a threatened species and coming through into the Antarctic Treaty consultative meetings and the discussions there around the emperor penguins as well. And that's all included Australian scientists as part of that working group and that work.
Thank you. I'll go to the Deputy Chair now.
Thank you. And Dr Hancock, thank you for being here today. And I'll just go back to the funding issues that you've raised. Have you approached or formally approached either department or the government in relation to I think you mentioned a figure of around $480,000 a year for the work of SUS. Have you made a formal approach in that regard, please?
So we've been making approaches through the Australian Antarctic Division.
So it's directly through the AAD?
Yes, that's correct. So on SUS's behalf, the University of Tasmania has also been approaching, I'm not quite sure who they've spoken to, but they've spoken into the department prior to being DQ, but DQ department as well. And they've also talked across other departments and other agencies, and a lot of that has been facilitated through the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Right. So just when you're talking with your international potential philanthropic type organisations, who is most likely in that space, and have you made approaches to them as well, please? Yeah,
so the one at the moment that we've approached in confidence is the Prince of Monaco Foundation. He has the Polar Initiative as part of that foundation with quite a lot of funding for both polar regions, and so we've put a submission into there seeking funding. That's the primarily one that we've identified at the moment, but working with the community if there are others that we can identify as well.
Right. And with your membership, when you provide the information and you provide the science and it's openly available, what sort of feedback do you get, and how is that then passed back, whether it's to the AAD or other, in a useful form, which is, from what I can understand, is part of your role?
Yeah, so it would depend on what that is. We provide synthesis documents. So one that we do annually is we provide the Southern Ocean section for the State of the Climate report that's put out by the Bulletin of American Meteorological Society, where it provides the status of the Southern Ocean for the previous year, and then together in that report with all the rest of the climate. We could be providing information into the status of the climate reports for Australia as well. It could be synthesis documents going into the Antarctic Treaty consultative meeting. So we worked with SCAR to provide an assessment of the observing system for both the Southern Ocean and Antarctic, which is why we worked with SCAR, because it included terrestrial as well for that, to all of the consultative parties within there. It's going into various different meetings, providing presentations and summaries to those, through to then things like our community statement and the media releases we had that go to the general public from the SUS symposium last year as well. It's not necessarily always driven by me in SUS, but a lot of it is driven by our scientists, and I really prefer to put our scientists forward. They're the experts in all the matters, so I put them front and centre to be able to present that information out.
And look, from what we know about the Noisina, it's certainly a capacity that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So what is coming out of that that type of research and what's ahead, I would think your members, how many of your members are actually Australian-based? Because you've got a mixed
grouping, so 15% are Australian.
15% are Australian, and the value of that information that we now see coming out of this, globally leading equipment would be extraordinary for your members, I would think.
Yeah, definitely, and we work quite closely with the Australian Antarctic Data Centre in particular to make sure that that data is available through our data products, so that then it's used in collaboration with other international data, but is really getting that visibility internationally so international researchers can use that data, and then vice versa, research that's done by other countries is available for Australian researchers to work with, so that can all be combined together, because it's really, to understand the Southern Ocean, we can't just look at one region, we can't just look at the East Antarctic and understand what's going on. We need to tie it all together, and that's why we need all the nations working together, all the different programs working together, and all that data coming together so we can actually build that understanding. None of us can do it alone, we all need each other.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Can I just ask about the priorities for observations? You touched on it before, but broadly, how are they set, and can you give us some examples?
So we're actually in the process, we're going to be redoing it this year. So our current priorities go through to the end of 2025. We've got a meeting actually next month where we're pulling together our scientific steering committee to assess those priorities and look at what future priorities look like, whether it's the same ones or new ones. We've got those split across different science themes, and then it would depend on the theme what they are. So they're covering the physical environments of the Southern Ocean, trying to understand Antarctic bottom water, the warming of Antarctic bottom water, and therefore the melting that's doing of the ice shelves, through to trying to understand the ecology and the biology, to be able to understand the population estimates of seals and penguins, to be able to understand the status of those populations, how they're changing. And I think one that has definitely been a priority in the past, but is definitely going to have more of a focus moving forward, is going to be the sea ice. Trying to understand the changes in the sea ice, what's driven that. I'm not a sea ice expert, but I think we really are in a position where we're trying to re-understand what's happening there, and at the forefront of that, and then all the observations we need to be able to get that understanding as well. And new technologies coming online, development of satellites is really enhancing our ability to be able to observe those systems and observe them in times where it's really hard to get there through winter and into the beginning of the spring, our Australian springtime.
Thank you. Do you, or is your board or what have you, of the view that you need to stay independent from other large scientific or Antarctic research organisations? Like, I'm just wondering, would it help to make you more sustainable if you were auspiced by the university, for example, IMAS, and kind of integrate into them?
So I guess in some regards we are a little bit integrated in the university in that they're actually our host here in Hobart and have been since our inception. Historically, they've been our major sponsor as well. But they've always, I guess the power of the Southern Ocean Observing System and programs like SUS is that independence. It's the ability to be able to go into CAMLAR and the treaty meetings not associated with a single country, to be able to provide that independent voice. So I think we always really do need to keep that independence so that we can provide that independent, really valued voice at those forums. But that voice is not actually different to what Australia is saying. So I don't think that that's a concern for Australia. If we move to other countries, though, I can't say if that might change. And that is something we're definitely looking at if we moved.
What did you call your scientific body that you bounce things off?
Two scientific committees on Antarctic research and oceanic research, and they're both independent bodies as well. They both have member nations as part of their delegations that cover most of the world that operate in the oceans and in the Antarctic.
Yeah, sorry, it was more that group of scientists that inform the priorities. And
yes, yeah. So we've got a number of different committees. We've got our main one is our scientific steering committee. They're independent scientists. We do aim to have diversity across those, across geographic country diversity as well as discipline diversity. We like to have scientists that are connected to other international programs. So, for example, it might be a program that is like the Argo program, that's one of the main observing mechanisms, those floats that get put into the ocean, so that they're really speaking on behalf of a broad range of communities. We also have broader membership beyond that with all of our working groups. We've got about 15 working groups at the moment, and then most of those have a leadership team of around about 10, depending on the working group. So it's quite a broad group of people that we're pulling off, but we also then connect out to the rest of the community for feedback. We might connect with, say, for example, when we're developing our ocean ice shelf interactions priorities, we will connect with the terrestrial scientists working on the ice shelves, so that we make sure that those priorities meet with what's priorities for them as well and the key questions that they're asking. The same for anything that's looking at ocean atmosphere. We'd be linking with the World Meteorological Organisation. And then our science plan goes through an independent international review, the same as scientific publications do. That's coordinated by the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research and the Scientific Committee on Oceanic Research, and they will get independent, so people that aren't closely tied into SEUS. They're normally a member of SEUS just purely because most of the community is, but they're not part of one of the key authors of that plan, to review that plan, provide feedback on that plan, and then depending on that feedback, we will make the appropriate adjustments before it's released.
Okay, last one from me. So do you have chapters? Like, is there a Christchurch chapter and a San Diego
Not
chapter?
Geographic chapters, no.
With modern telecommunications, you don't really need to, do you? Everyone can
No.
jump on and...
So what we have is more, I guess if you're talking along that lines, we've got what we call regional working groups, and it's actually set across regions of the Southern Ocean and Antarctica.
Yeah.
That's where we work to try and get the collaboration between the nations, because most nations, say for example East Antarctica, it's a group of countries that work there. There's a group that work in the Ross Sea, and so we've got working groups that have members and leadership that cover those nations and are really working to be able to collaborate between those nations, to be able to make each other aware of what the other nation's doing, and so where that they can overlap and really benefit from each other or work together. And those regional working groups are also currently working to develop maps of observational coverage for us, so that we've really got a nice map that we can put out to say, here's our gaps in the observing system, this is what needs to be filled, this is what we're currently observing really well, and we need to keep observing it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Senator Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your evidence today. Just wondering, just to sort of take it up a level, given your experience observing the way that other jurisdictions, other countries are involved in the Antarctic region, could you give us a bit of a sense of maybe the differences in the way that Australia approaches this, both positive and negative? Really interested in your views.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I can start with a sort of challenges that Australia is having at the moment, to say they're not alone. A lot of other countries are having similar challenges. We're all struggling to recover from COVID and the impacts that that had on the observing system. We're all struggling with economic challenges. And the fact that it is really hard and expensive to get to Antarctica, that is limiting our scientists' ability to go south. A number of countries have moved to one-ship models. A number have new ships that have either recently come online or are coming online soon. So all dealing with similar challenges to Australia. Some are dealing with them slightly differently than others. I don't know I can say that some are better than others. Probably they've all got pros and negatives. Some countries definitely, and Australia really promotes that international collaboration, international science. Some countries maybe don't as much. Some countries are really open with their data, so Australia, the US, much of Europe, very, very open with data. Other countries, we struggle a lot more getting the data out of those countries. But I think across the board, scientist to scientist level, which is where SUS works, we work really, really well. It doesn't have as much impact because they work scientist to scientist. It's not necessarily government department to government department. So we often cut across any of the geopolitical problems. We find in SUS we're kind of like a next level down, and everyone's just working together as best as they can to be able to get the research out that we need to get. Everyone's looking for new inventive ways to be able to collect the observations. They're looking for different opportunities to get south. They might not be traditional ways of always going with a country's icebreaker. Maybe it's on a tourism vessel instead. And they're all just looking to broaden their horizons to be able to collect these observations.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
and look, I'm new to it, right? So, and the last couple of days, by having a look at the program, going on board the vessel this morning, super impressed that Australia is stepping up and investing in the way that we do. We're taking this seriously, but I'm just, I guess, curious to get an understanding, given your perspective, working across lots of jurisdictions. How do we sort of compare and relate to others?
Look, I would say Australia is definitely leading. I think there's things that we can do better, but other countries have other things that they can do better as well. And some of it, I think, like you go into Europe, some of the science that they're doing is pretty incredible, but they're also in a really unique situation that they work at the European Commission level. So a lot of it they're talking is European Horizon funding, it's EU funding. It's quite different what they're tapping into than what we are in Australia. So I think it's probably a little bit hard to compare nation to nation, but particularly per capita, you're right. What Australia is investing in Antarctica is very impressive. I don't think any scientist is ever going to say we don't need more. I think we need more. We need more observations.
Yes.
And I think really it is that what happens in the Southern Ocean doesn't stay there. We need to understand what's happening there. Even if you take a sea level rise, I mean, the people down the road in Kingston, I don't know if you're familiar with Hobart, but they really need to know what's happening for sea level rise to know, is their house going to be underwater in X amount of years' time? How often are they going to be affected by storm surge? We need to know what's happening in Antarctica to be able to know that. So I think it's critical that we keep investing what's being currently invested and invest more, but also invest it smartly, and to be really need to work collaboratively together to do that between all the countries, and that's where SUS comes in to facilitate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question following on from Mr Gosling in relation to the support the University of Tasmania are giving to you. Given the importance of your work, are they interested in picking up the funding gap at the moment?
The university historically has always picked up any gaps, so we've got a number of different partners. So at the moment 5, as I said, cover across the university, CSIRO, state and federal government. The university has always kind of come in and said we will pick up the remainder of what's left after the other investments. They're not in a position they can do that anymore. They're not in a position that they can fund SUS the way that they have in the past. Their financial situation the same as universities around Australia. they're just not in a situation that they can. So unfortunately, we can't look to them to pick up the gap. We really need to be looking outside the university, whether it's in Australia or across the world, and we're trying across every single mechanism at the moment.
Have they given that reasoning to you formally, that they have insufficient funds? Is that subject to a formal negotiation? I mean, we might want to ask, for example, the university.
I was going to say that's probably a better question to
Yeah.
ask the university exactly on that, but they've very clearly stated that they're not in a position that they can fund SUS the way they have in the past.
Okay, that allows me then to ask them the question. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one last question from me as well. In your submission, you mentioned you're seeking a multi-year sponsorship agreement with Australia. What would happen if that was not granted?
Yeah, so the multi-year is really the stability we need. We've operated on single-year funding for the last 2 years and then again next year. That's really hard to operate under. It's having significant impacts on our ability to recruit and retain staff and therefore to meet the objectives of SUS. Look, we were very lucky to get away with a single-year bid for next year. So those bids have to be approved by Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research and Scientific Committee on Oceanic Research, and we're lucky, I think, that they approved that for next year. They're really not going to be in a position they're going to approve single years going forward. And so if we don't have something together multi-year by the end of this year, we're in a position we need to open that call to be able to really get all options on the table and to be able to assess what those options are. At the moment, the preference is to maintain the project office in Australia to retain the continuity, but that continuity is starting to get at serious threat with these single-year bids. So if we got a multi-year bid, if we open for an international call and got a multi-year bid from another country, that would definitely need to be assessed if that's the better movement forward for SUS. And that kind of comes outside of SUS's control. That goes to SCAR and SCORE to make that decision.
Right. So have other countries, do you have a sense that any other countries may be looking to do that?
I haven't formally gone asking other countries. Australia has supported SUS for so long. We want to make sure that we provide Australia with the opportunity to have that sole source bid. That's why we haven't gone out for international call. So I haven't gone brokering around other countries for the same reason. However, if we look to other international programs that have gone up for international call, there is one country that is commonly seen as putting a bid forward. Sometimes they're the only country, or they're putting forward a bid that is significantly higher than what any other country is putting in. I have to be a little bit careful. They are a member of SCAR and SCORE. They are a member and an important part of SUS as well. But, yeah, there is that one country that tend to put forward bids.
Right. Okay. Thank you. If there's no other questions, thank you very much again, Dr. Hancock. Really appreciated your evidence this afternoon. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and will have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Jump after next witnesses, you can go straight on.
I now welcome Hobart City Council. Sorry, City of Hobart Council. Well, I have a guess. I now welcome the representative of the City of Hobart Council to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Good afternoon. My name's Georgie Branch and I'm the Project Manager of International and Strategic Partnerships at City of Hobart.
Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I should advise that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing of proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Thanks again for being here today. I now invite you to make an opening statement before we proceed to questions.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to thank the committee for conducting this hearing in Hobart so that we can highlight how integral our city, Australia's Antarctic Gateway, is to connecting our country to Antarctica and providing substantial economic and social benefits across the nation. Here in Hobart, you are closer to Antarctica than you are to Darwin. And if you take a short walk around the waterfront, which I hear you have already today, you will see various historical monuments, public art, tourism attractions, institutions and businesses, not to mention Australia's icebreaker, the RSV Nyinga, reflecting that we are epicentre for Antarctic activity. We are proud of the globally competitive sector we have cultivated, offering extraordinary products and services which, coupled with our reputation for advanced science and research, has made us renowned for Antarctic leadership. The sector, comprising over 70 businesses and organisations, as evidenced by our membership of our Tasmanian Polar Network, is worth $183 million to the Tasmanian economy, supporting close to 1,000 local jobs. Across the island, businesses manufacture heavy-duty machinery, maritime products and building materials to support success in the world's most extremist environments. We provide reliable logistical services, and we have created unique technologies to support cutting-edge research and scientific campaigns. Industry is complemented by several institutions conducting Antarctic and Southern Ocean science and research in our city, and we have the largest concentration of scientists and researchers in the Southern Hemisphere. Leading these activities is the University's Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies, IMAS, which houses several specialised research programs, and CSIRO's Hobart base, which focuses on marine and atmospheric research and has the dedicated ocean research vessel, the RV Investigator. It's not here today. The people who do this work are valued members of our local community, but also the global scientific community. Their approach to research and their commitment and skills makes Australian Antarctic scientists and researchers the most valued and trusted collaboration partners. These programs, it is both our commercial offerings and our scientific agenda that attracts partnerships with other Antarctic programs such as France, Italy, Germany and Japan and the US, to name a few. And the programs, when they come to resupply with their icebreakers, bring $2 million into our economy per visit. And they use our international airport, which has currently been upgraded to increase capacity to connect to Antarctica by air. We're a meeting place of like minds, facilitating key discussions and decision-making, which has significant impacts on how Antarctica is cared for and managed. These consequential meetings include conferences such as the Council of National Antarctic Programs, COMNAP, which was held here last year, as well as the annual negotiations between members of the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. That one's a mouthful. That's called CAMLR. And these, they have their international secretariat here. For Hobart's role in facilitating our international relations, we actively engage with the other 4 Antarctic Gateway cities. We share similar values and we're committed to collaboration, exchange and leadership, which is reflective of the principles of the Antarctic Treaty System. This influential 5-way partnership will no doubt be strengthened through a formal mechanism in time, and Hobart will be a willing signatory. Not only is our Antarctic sector our city's greatest strength, but it also provides us with our greatest opportunity for growth. There is opportunity to bolster our Antarctic sector by fully embracing the university city concept and growing UTAS's footprint to support greater intersections between Antarctic and other disciplines, such as STEM, and unlocking more unique career pathways for our young people. Launceston moved its Newnham campus to Inverest to support the unique opportunity to leverage from the expertise and facilities of their Australian Maritime College, and this created a hub of excellence in key areas such as maritime engineering and innovation through the creation of the Defence and Maritime Innovation and Design Precinct. Unlike other gateway cities, we have the greatest advantage of being located right next door to the port infrastructure that supports primarily Australia's, but also other nations' Antarctic vessels. It's imperative that we maintain this advantage as a nation, but also as a city. With support and partnership of national, state and local government, our ongoing development and investments, such as upgrades to the port infrastructure and expansions of UTAS, are pivotal. They not only prepare us for the future challenges and opportunities in Antarctic exploration, but also solidify our role in national and in international contexts, driving forward both economic growth and cultural enrichment. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms Branch. And I'd like to just say we've all really been enjoying Hobart the last couple of days. It's a great city, so it's good to be here. I just want to go straight to the redevelopment of the Macquarie Wharf and, you know, obviously the funding dispute between the Commonwealth and state governments over the redevelopment have brought into question the presence of the Antarctic program here in Hobart. What would be what are the impacts of this delay in that redevelopment happening on the program and therefore the city and its economy more broadly?
Thank you for your question, Chair. The negotiations of the wharf upgrade have been significantly drawn out. It's now been 3 years. A lot of it's been behind closed doors, and it's been quite worrying to our sector, but also the community and what that future connection to Antarctica looks like for us. I think it's jeopardising funding opportunities. We are missing out on those funding opportunities over this period that we could have secured because we haven't been into position to lock those in. But it's putting at risk our gateway status, and it's our international reputation as an Antarctic gateway city that I think is slowly starting to be a little bit less because people are worried about whether we're going to continue to be in that position. It has been asked of us when we do engage with other countries about that. It often gets raised, but I suppose for us, we took note of the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister's endorsement of the Antarctic Gateway City in Hobart and its future, and so we'd like to count on that continued support as we put pressure on those parties to lock down those negotiations and progress to the next stages of detailed design.
Thank you. And could you elaborate on the benefits of that project for specifically the Antarctic program, but also for Hobart more broadly?
As I said in my opening statement, what's unique about our gateway city is that we have the infrastructure to support the Australian Antarctic program right on our doorstep. Some other gateways around the world don't have the boats sitting right on their waterfront where all the activity is happening, and they have to go down much further away from where their Antarctic scientists are located to actually load up and board and head off. So that's a great advantage of ours, and it's actually impressed a lot of countries when they've come to visit us for conferences such as COMNAP, that it was actually visible, and right there where they were staying they could see it out their window. I think that is a great benefit to the service delivery that we can offer the Australian Antarctic program, with that connection and closeness in services to the vessel that they operate, but also to other countries who come and bring their icebreakers here and visit us. All of our services are located along the waterfront, and we can provide that bespoke service to the waterfront, to those ships as they're loading up. All the supplies are there. We've got opportunities as businesses are located so closely for them to collaborate and provide greater levels of support. So this hub concept that we have with everything within our Antarctic Gateway City being so close is a great advantage to us.
Thank you. Did you?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Branch, for being here with us today. In relation to the precinct, it was part of the Antarctic Science Precinct was part of the Hobart City deal. Can you tell me where that's up to from your perspective, please?
I think that I can certainly provide more information in terms of people within the council that are specifically looking after that project. I think from their perspective negotiations on that and meetings and progress on that has definitely slowed in terms of that in regard to the Antarctic and Science Precinct. So the Hobart City deal and some of those projects under that obviously ongoing, but that aspect has definitely slowed. It seems that the precinct concept now still is identified as part of the precinct master planning, but it's going to be a much reduced footprint. I think it's just over a hectare now, which is a lot less than what people in the sector were expecting as a future opportunity for them and their businesses. So while that's disappointing that it's not going to be fulfilled in the or realised in the way that the sector kind of envisaged a few years ago, I think it has moved on a bit, that we still understand that we're a very connected gateway, as we were saying, that we are still quite closely located with a lot of those various businesses and institutions. So while there's still potential for them to be all housed together in that smaller footprint, if that's not realised, or if not all those tenants end up anchoring that site, we're still very closely connected, and we would be reimagining kind of that gateway Antarctic Science Precinct concept.
So are the other elements of the city deal all delivered at this point?
They're not all delivered, but there's more progress on those in terms of the transit corridor. There's still work on that, and some other projects under that, including the airport upgrades.
Right, and just one final question, if I could, Chair. Does the City Council have a role in the potential design and the actual stadium and wharf precinct area? Do you have any role in that particular process and design, please?
So, City of Hobart, obviously, as a key stakeholder, is being consulted as part of that project. It provided a significant submission to the Macquarie Point Corporation when they were doing their initial planning. Meetings continue to be ongoing with Macquarie Point and the state government, but I think that there's definitely scope for the city to have more involvement in that design and decision-making process around that precinct.
And would you see that the actual wharf itself and the capacity there, we've heard talk about 2 ships in the future, and the capacity at the wharf and potential needs in the future, is that something that the city is considering as part of your contributions in relation to the design of this?
Yeah, the Macquarie Wharf redevelopment is definitely a strategic priority for the city that we push as one of our key priorities in that precinct area, and providing that capacity so that not only a second Australian ship, when there's an opportunity for that to come online, but also that we continue to service other nations and their icebreakers when they visit, so that we have capacity to have more than one Antarctic icebreaker and in port at one time over the season when they're very active.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Does the city have a view on the need for a fuel barge operating in the port?
I think that the fuel barge is definitely something that we need to have in the city, within the port, to be able to Nyenya to have remain fulfilling its needs, and to not have the process of fuelling the Nyenya using the road, to bring in the trucks in for multiple refuelling visits, and we certainly don't want to see the Nyenya having to go to Devonport to do that. So that for us is something that's key as well, to making Nyenya the most effective it can be in operating from Hobart.
Is there any other commercial benefit to it, like to other types of vessels and operations?
I think there certainly would, but it would definitely create within the city limits another industry for the city, where it will create jobs. It would be something that we don't have within our city limits now, so that's definitely a positive thing for our economy.
Okay. And on another topic, what role does Antarctica have in tourism here within Hobart? Does it bring tourists here? Does it have any bearing at all?
So this season, this cruise season, which kicks off around September, we're having 2 cruise operators coming online that are specifically focused on Antarctic tourism. I believe one's actually coming down from Argentina, so that's a very long cruise. So there are other Antarctic gateways that their key strength, whereas ours is the science and research and the logistics, so we can support bespoke, straight on your doorstep logistics. For other gateways, they have huge numbers of tourism and cruise ships going through their ports, hundreds over the season. So ours is very, very small in relation to that. But those boats that we are working with to come down are very focused on providing that very bespoke experience that's reflected on providing that citizen science experience. And so that's something that's really coming online, getting citizens to be involved. They're never going to be able to access Antarctica in any other way, but this is how they can contribute to such an amazing place, and our understanding and the research about it. So they can actually partake in science aboard those boats. They can start to find out more about Antarctica. Obviously, they're already very invested and interested if they've pot forward the money to go on one of those cruises. But there's specifically designed programs and activities on board that really gets them to really connect with Antarctica, and that's how we buy some even more of that social licence about it, its future care and how important it is by having people on board. So the tourism has a place in terms of that citizen science and getting people connected with Antarctica. But I don't think we want to see the scale and volume of tourism boats that other gateways, and we actually just can't because we are further located away than they are. They're a couple of days sailing and we're over, 11 days or more. But those bespoke ones that are really focused on that citizen science experience and the higher end, they have that more environmental conscious profile in how they operate. That's when we have some here, that's what we want to see.
Thanks, Jay.
Yes.
In relation to the Hobart City deal, do you publish an annual report? I just thought of this, so my apologies. It's all over the website. Do the respective partners publish where they're at with that deal, and whether anyone's behind in their contributions, or how do the 3 partners or local government and state and the Commonwealth hold themselves to account in the arrangement?
Now, can I refer to just my
Absolutely.
colleague over there for some advice to make sure I'm right?
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Eaton, Acting Head of Intergovernmental Relations and Partnerships. Is that okay that I jump in? So we have what's called the Greater Hobart Strategic Partnerships, which is the 4 Greater Hobart mayors and councils, and they all come together as a collective to discuss the status of each of the Hobart City Deal initiatives. As part of the Hobart City Deal, they are required to report. I'm not sure if that's a web-based report mechanism or if it's a verbal conversation with the government.
As a member of the Commonwealth or a local resident, that the plan's working, the plan's delivering? Where is that captured?
Very good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. I'm not part of the Greater Hobart Strategic Partnership. We have a dedicated person that's sort of delivering that strategic direction.
Could you take that on notice?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not asking for confidential information.
No.
About how...
What the reporting mechanism is for the community. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And just following on from that, so maybe don't dart away, just in case you can assist.
Yeah.
Just coming to the dispute and the wharf and how that's how that issue is developing. How much? I know the council, as I understood your evidence, is being consulted and has a view. Does the council own any of the land nearby and therefore a stakeholder from a point of view of being a landowner or a regulatory stakeholder? Or is the council merely a community view and it's the state government that owns the land or can legislate accordingly?
I can probably answer that. So TasPorts would be the owner of the land. As local government, we would be the local planning authority.
Right. So your participation is from a planning perspective.
Correct.
And your input to the master plan.
Correct.
Has there been any public indications that the state will legislate and sort of override the council? And I'm not asking in a particular political way. Is it one of those developments that's so large that the state government...
Not to my knowledge, but there's obviously the legislation around projects of state significance.
Correct,
where you'll see that with the stadium. If it came to that point in time where the funding's actually secured, then that would be a discussion at that point in time.
Right, so that's separate from the wharf. I'm not totally au fait with about the stadium. The stadium doesn't overlap into... I suppose where my question is coming from.
Yeah.
Does the stadium and the significance... I know the state government's investing, getting to invest in that. Is that quite distinct from Macquarie Wharf? Because we understood there may be traffic issues from discussions today. Is it all part of the equation, or is it sort of discrete and then there are flow-on impacts?
Well, it's part of the precinct,
Right.
so the stadium and the wharf. We're not at the point where the funding hasn't been secured for the wharf, so we don't really know what's going to happen with it, what's involved.
Right.
But at this point in time, the stadium itself is going to be go through that legislation process. So I think it's sort of early days, really.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope that answers your questions.
The upgrade in that master plan that's out at the moment in terms of priority of the different areas that the precinct is going to focus on first. Obviously the stadium, but in that kind of priority one area is identified as the wharf upgrade, because there are other parts of the precinct and they are like priority 2 and 3. So it's indicated that that's priority 1.
So is there intending to be overarching legislation? It depends if the Parliament passes it, but is it intended overarching legislation from the state which encompasses the whole precinct? Or just the oval?
I'm not sure.
It may be an unfair question.
I think it's really early days.
Yeah. Where I was coming from is how much of a seat at the table does the council have to realise its ambitions? Obviously, from at least at this point, a planning perspective and a community perspective. That just helps me try to understand
who's who in the
who's who in the jungle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your evidence today and taking our questions. If you're able to provide the additional information you asked for, if you could please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 16th of August, that would be great. And you will also be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors. Thanks again. And I'd like to thank committee members, Secretariat and Broadcasting for your time today, and this hearing is now adjourned.